of modern poetry. By Wallace Stevens. Wallace Stevens. Wallace Stevens, an American poet, was born on October 2, 1879 in Pennsylvania. Attended Harvard as a special student from 1897 to 1900. Graduated with a law degree in 1903 from New York Law School. First period of writing begins with the 1923 publication of Harmonium. Won the Pulitzer Prize for Poetry for his collected poems in 1955. Died on August 2, 1955. Of modern poetry. Published in the third volume of Poetry Parts of a World, published in 1942 and republished in 1951. Gives a direct definition of modern poetry. States the difference between old poetry and modern poetry. Indicates the realism in poetry. Summary. The poem opens with the definition of modern poetry and how it works on the mind of the reader. He states that the poem is of the mind in the act of finding. According to him, the scene of the poem was set and the same is repeated in the script of the poem. He indicates the changes occurred in the modern poetry which shifted from a souvenir of the past. He gives his views on the modern poetry, saying that it has to be living and must learn the speech of the place. Poetry must face the men and meet the women of the time, or it must be relevant to the people living in that time. Unlike the earlier poems, the modern poetry has to deal with the subjects like war and has to find something to suffice it. As the modern poetry is dealing with different subjects, it has to create its own stage to express the ideas. Poetry has to stand up on a stage as an insatiable actor for creating new things for the readers to enjoy. Slowly, with meditation, the poetry must enter into the ears of the readers and repeat the sound to the invisible audience. It has to express the most delicate part and must touch the most vulnerable part of the reader. It has to express what is there in the innermost heart of the reader and have to merge with the thoughts of the reader. He states that the thought in the poem and the mind of the reader must become the same on reading the poetry. It must be like a metaphysical actor in the dark who is playing an instrument or a wired string to attract the audience. It must reach the mind of the readers and has to descend beyond the emotions of the readers. On reading the poem, the reader must feel that his mind is reflected in those words and the ideas are expressed. The purpose of the poem is the act of finding something hidden in the inner mind of the reader and merging the same. On reading a poetry, the reader must find solace or some sort of satisfaction the mind is longing for. The satisfaction can be found in simple things, like a man skating or a woman combing her hair. Finally, he states that the poem is the act of the mind. Thus the poem, through expressing the act of the mind, makes the reader's mind to find satisfaction.